Andrew, great to see you. Thanks for joining us. Andrew, we met for a coffee recently and had a good old chat and thought it'd be great to come together and do an episode of Diary of a CTO because you are, by way of introduction, the CTO of PCF Bank currently, where you've spent a good sort of 20 years of your career. And I think well, I'm sure to say you've been on probably a hell of a journey throughout your time there over the last couple of decades, and you've seen the business achieve its banking license, and then more recently actually wind down its banking arm. So I bet there's a lot to unpack there, a lot of interesting stories to tell as a tech leader. But probably most excitingly, you are actually about to embark upon a new adventure shortly, and you'll be joining the police force as the head of applications and devices for Surrey and Sussex. So I think it'd be really interesting to hear the differences between the two positions in terms of processes and practices, and the difference between the private and the public sector from a tech standpoint. So I'm sure we'll delve into that as the episode progresses. But before we get too far into it, let's talk about you, and how you got started in technology, I guess, and your journey through PCF to becoming the CTO.
Thanks, Guy, and thanks for the introduction, and thanks for hosting me on this podcast. So I've been with PCF Bank, as you said, for over 20 years now. We're a small bank lending to small businesses and to consumers. And over the last 20 years, I've seen my career move from a credit controller in a very small company. We had about 25 staff, through to a small technology team. And then as the technology team has grown, that's where I become the head of IT, and then embarked on the change management aspect of that. My background is really project management. So I'm a Prince 2 registered practitioner, and with that I've led a lot of the projects across the bank, including the acquisition of the banking license, or the attainment of the banking license, I should say. That was a significant program of works involving multiple vendors over a multi-year process and multi-million-pound project. And we successfully launched as a bank in December 2016 when we gained our banking license, and we launched to the public in July of 2017. Over the course of the years, as we became a bank, there's a lot of regulations and a lot of rules we have to adhere to. We have a obviously significant customer base, and we need to ensure that our systems are secure and they are resilient as well, and protected from malicious third parties. So we've embarked on a number of transformation projects to ensure we are resilient, are protected, and that we can also move into becoming a digital business using data to help drive a lot of our decisions. So it's a quick intro of me.
Fantastic, yeah. I mean, like I say, that journey in itself to, I know it's no mean feat to get a banking license, and I dare say that wasn't an easy task, certainly from a technology perspective. But I guess, do you feel your background in project management sort of helped police that, excuse the pun, police that sort of process and keep it on track?
Definitely, it certainly helped in terms of defining a project structure, the project governance associated with the project. And whilst Prince 2 may be seen as a bit onerous, it can be used for agile purposes, for making quick decisions, and minimizing a lot of the templates or paperwork that you need to have. So it was essential that the banking project was run using a recognizable methodology, and it was ultimately successful. We delivered the project on time, and and we delivered exactly what we said to the regulator that we would be delivering, i.e. a banking platform for customers and for them to deposit savings with us, and for that to complement our lending background, which we've been doing for the last 20 plus years.
Fantastic, yeah, and I love your story. I think it's fantastic that you've gone on that journey of, like, say, starting as a credit controller, and then ending up at the pinnacle of the tech part of the business as the CTO. Was it always a natural choice, a natural sort of progression for you to go into technology? Because obviously, starting as a credit controller, then coming from a classic project management background, how did you find that sort of transition into the technology space, and was that always a natural decision for you?
Yeah, I felt it was probably a natural progression because a lot of the projects that I needed to manage, typically they all have a technology aspect to them, either involving technology, or they are the the project, i.e. a system upgrade or a system implementation. So I felt you always needed to have a technical sort of background, so you would throw yourself in to all of the project like workshops, so you understood the systems, you understood the infrastructure, how all the bits would join together. And so that naturally increases and enhances your technology knowledge. And as you then move to the next project, you take your lessons learned and apply that to the new project, which again will probably have a technology aspect. So you felt over time that you were very technology competent, which enabled you to then have good oversight of how to run the operation, what good cyber looks like, what good resilient systems look like. And that sort of led naturally into this my head of IT role before becoming the chief technology officer.
Fair enough, fair enough. And the having straddled both sides of the coin and, let's say, become more au fait with the world of technology, now as a CTO, what do you feel from your experience are the kind of most valuable qualities of a technology leader?
I think there's a clear difference between a leader and a manager. And as a technology leader, you need to have a clear vision and a clear strategy that is worked in conjunction with the executive committee or the board, and you are able to play out that vision to your team and bring them along on the journey for that. What they don't want is somebody micromanaging them or helping oversee or um, do the little detail. What they need is a leader to help point and steer the ship, so to speak, rather than be in the engine room or even overseeing what's going on in the engine room. They initially, I used to say, the role of the leader is to steer the ship, but ultimately a leader probably wouldn't even be on the ship. They would be back at base, and there would be a pool of ships out and about, and your strategic vision is such that you have people, talent, qualities, resources, etc., to be on those ships and running them successfully. You need to be able to be accountable for your decisions. You need to be decisive. And it's important to have a collaborative culture, one that's non-blaming. I think is very key within the world of IT and even projects. It's very easy and for things to go wrong, and it'd be wrong of anyone to say nothing ever goes wrong, because they'd be lying. So it's important that we recognize mistakes, but we don't point fingers. We work together, and if one part of the body fails, and the whole body fails, so to speak. So that's a clear sort of quality of a tech leader. They also need to be adaptable. Projects priorities do change very quickly, and as we found at PCF Bank, they can change literally overnight what we're working on. So we need to be able to adapt very quickly, have the team nimble enough in order to move on to a different project, and ensuring that our systems remain resilient. We're not dropping the BAU tasks that we need to maintain. And yeah, that's probably the main aspects of it. And probably finally, for when things do go wrong, it's those problem solving skills. I'm quite an analytical person, and I like to join the dots and see the dots. So when systems go down, it can often be difficult to work out where the problem is. But once you start getting a picture of where the different pieces are, you can start working out where the problem is, and then use your knowledge to help solve the problem quickly to avoid disruption.
Yeah, I love that. And I think the bit that really stood out for me there is when you talk about the not focusing on a blame culture, and I definitely agree. That's we look at a lot of the very good clients that we have that I feel have a really strong culture around that, and I think the freedom to fail, is a really important thing in any business. And I think that really extrapolates out, beyond technology and I dare say within recruitment as well. The first year of doing the job really is pretty much failure on a consistent basis, but it's kind of how you reframe that failure to not necessarily, focus on the finger pointing, like you say, and
Yeah.
play the blame card, but actually it's about what can we take from that, what can we learn from that, and kind of move forward. There's one client we used to work with actually who had on a Monday morning, they always came in and they had what was called the Church of Fail, where every Monday morning, everyone in the team had to stand up and basically say something they did wrong the week before, and then everybody started clapping, but they could only sit down when everybody had finished clapping. So depending how bad it was, like people would clap for ages to kind of keep them up there. To kind of, so there's a little bit of blame in there, but it was all in good fun and all in good spirits. But I think that's I actually took that on board as a great way of sort of framing failure in terms of how you build a really strong culture, a collaborative culture where people just will try their best but aren't afraid to take action. And I think that's a really important thing.
Yeah.
Like you said, unfortunately, things will always go wrong. So let's sort of talk a bit about that, and I guess some of the challenges you've experienced throughout your time at PCF as a CTO. So yeah, what would you say have been your biggest challenges as a tech leader, manager, CTO, and how did you overcome those?
Yeah, so some of the biggest challenges we've had have been regulatory changes, and having to implement new frameworks in quite quick order. So an example is the operational resilience framework was a PRA and FCA consultation paper that came into effect on the 1st of April last year. And with that, organizations had to have defined their important business services, not systems, their actual services in terms of what they offered, and then have to have mapped those down in terms of resources, people, technology, third parties, etc. So it's a complete mapping exercise, then agree with the business at what point of downtime would this cause a maximum tolerable, disruption. And we would talk to the business and they might say 1 hour, to which you would go for an exercise to say, well, actually, if our systems were down for an hour, it wouldn't cause regulatory, damage or reputational damage or profit loss implications. And we'd work with the business and stakeholders to agree suitable maximum tolerable disruptions. And so in relatively quick order, we had our important business services named, mapped, the tolerances set. We then had to go about testing those and building up scenarios of when they could go down and how long it would take us to recover that service. So that's been one of the challenges in more recent times. The other challenge is, as a bank, there's a lot of auditing. So we're subject to a number of internal audits and external audits to make sure our systems are secure, resilient, etc. And we also have to undergo cyber essentials penetration tests as part of PCI DSS, and also Swift attestation and testing as part of that. So you have to always be in a position of, happy to having, your homework marked by others rather than by yourself. So you have to be open. And if an audit comes back and says it's great, but here's some, recommendations, we will work with the auditors to implement those recommendations quickly, rather than feeling a bit aggrieved having to work with third parties telling you that your systems aren't perhaps as secure or resilient as they should be. Some of the other challenges in more recent times has been, with PCF Bank, we've had our shares suspended on the AIM market. We've had to make some tough decisions. We've had to descope projects, and within all of that, we've had to ensure that our teams are supported, that we maintain morale, and we're able to maintain the key players within the business as well. So part of that is having open communication, and with that, we will have every 2 weeks we have what we call a business bites, or a town hall meeting, where everyone in this company gets together, either over Teams or within the office, and we would talk through the ups and downs of the past couple of weeks. What are the challenges? What are the updates going on? So that we can try and be as transparent as possible, with the team, so that they know what's going on, and to try and reassure our colleagues, about where we're at the moment as well. So that's been some of the biggest challenges over the probably last year, as I said, with the AIM suspension, withdrawing from the lending market, and ultimately deciding to withdraw from the UK banking market as well, has all bit happened in the last sort of 12 to 18 months, which of course brings uncertainty, and with that, pressure. And so we have to do our best as leaders to support staff, encourage staff, and keep going really as well. We still have activities, BAU activities we need to perform, and we still have projects that we need to complete as well. And so that's been some of the key challenges, and over the last sort of 12 to 18 months.
Absolutely, yeah, I can imagine, and I think the hallmark of a great CTO is sort of having that people and softer side, as well as the sort of technology strategy piece, and I guess at a time like this of uncertainty for others in the business, it becomes even more important to become a good manager of people, doesn't it, as well, and sort of be able to really listen and understand, and sort of guide and coach those people. So yeah, I can understand that's a very important part of it. And it's interesting when you were speaking there. Actually, I was thinking about talk about working in a regulated environment. I guess I could probably talk about this now, but the role you're about to move on to, on the surface level, PCF Bank, and then joining the police force, a lot of differences clearly between those two industries, and hopefully a really exciting sort of next step for you to move into. But I guess in many ways also a few similarities in sort of working in a very regulated environment, to the degree of standards that you've got to adhere to and make sure that you're sort of complying with, and that kind of thing. So yeah, talk us through your thought process to go from 20 years in the commercial sort of FS and banking space to biting on a whole new challenge in joining the police force to focus on their tech side.
Yeah, of course. So after 20 years within financial services and the banking industry. And with the uncertainty at the moment with PCF Bank, and also there's a lot of companies, other banks going through similar stresses as well at the moment. There comes an opportunity where you start to think, I could move to another bank and do similar things, or I could look elsewhere in different sectors as well. And part of my thinking was, if I was to drop dead tomorrow, and apologies for being morbid, but what would my legacy be? And I could say, yes, I've been successful as a CTO and we've attained a banking license, etc. And we've helped hundreds of thousands of customers as well. And that's great. But there feels a need to think that what more could I have done? And so you start looking at other sectors, and initially I started looking in the charity sector to try and sort of give back to the, more visibly to the community. And then this police role opened up within Sussex Police, which is local to me. So it's about a 20-minute commute by train rather than an hour and 40-minute commute into London. So I started exploring that and had a interview with themselves, and the organization very, very different. They have over 10,000 officers and staff working for Surrey and Sussex Police, supporting over, I think it was over 3 million citizens across the counties as well.
Wow.
So having the ability to help define and support the applications that officers are using on the front line became very appealing, and having the ability to influence and look after the devices they use as well, from like body worn video to fingerprint scanners to mobile phones and the applications they use on there comes a lot of interest. A very different sector, very very regimented on one side of the organization, where you have the police officers and you have the police staff supporting those officers sort of behind the scenes working. But ultimately, without the staff members, the officers will be very hindered in their frontline duties.
Mm.
So the opportunity arose, and it was obviously great to be accepted into the role. And I've had an open day there this week where I had a meet and greet the team, and it's a very professional organization. A lot to take in. There's good structure, but there's also areas for improvement as well, and that's where I think my abilities and leadership will help with that, to help put together a roadmap and a strategy for the future. And ultimately, you'd then say, in the future, what would my legacy be? And I could say, well, if I've helped frontline officers even by a few minutes per day by having a slightly different way of doing something on one of their devices, and that frees up time to help the community, then that's a great way of serving the community and serving my local community, giving back to the community, and ultimately something I can be proud of and my children can be proud of, as we're working for the police force.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I really respect that, and I think it's a really important thing because, very often, I think we've probably seen this a little bit more since COVID. Actually, when I think about my sort of 15 years of recruiting for technology professionals, very often when we're speaking to people now, the words that are getting used are, purpose, mission, legacy, like you say, and actually a range of seniority as well. One of the key things that I think a lot of technology professionals really want to see in the world that we're living now is what the impact of their work.
Yeah,
Certainly within the data science field, we're seeing a really big push now from great candidates wanting to work in the tech for good space, and kind of B Corp kind of companies where the types of problems they're solving are having real social impact, and they can go to bed every day knowing actually whatever they've done is had it's a step in the right direction, and and rather sort of cheesily, but is genuinely very true. When I founded True North, I was really quite disenfranchised with the recruitment industry in general, because having worked for 10 years in another environment where it's purely focused around money and numbers on a board, and not really about the people you were serving, or actually just general levels of job fulfillment or happiness, both internally within the business and externally. One of the things I really wanted the True North business stand for was about actually helping people be happy at work, because I knew that it's one of the biggest, it can be one of your biggest sources of happiness or your biggest sources of misery, what you do for sort of 12 hours a day. So if we could generally take somebody from place A to place B, and place B is going to be a place where they're going to be happier and have more smiles on their face every day, then I think that's a really worthwhile thing that we can be doing.
exactly.
So yeah, I really buy into that, and I think that's a really really great point. And also I can imagine in that environment as well, like literally the work you're doing will have a direct impact. Obviously the world we live in now is a very digital world, and clearly the systems within the police force, I'm sure, will rely very heavily on the applications and devices that you're going to be looking after. What are you sort of most excited about from a technology point of view, in terms of some of the challenges and some of the areas that you feel you can add a lot of value in your role?
Yeah, so a lot of the interest I have is in sort of data-driven decision making. So here at PCF Bank, I built a data science team headed up by a great head of data, and the whole intention was to take our data we have and try and make informed decisions using that data, and using machine learning to help forecast and predict when a loan might end, for example, and also just give us a lot more insight into our data in terms of how much cash has been paid versus how much cash was due, and a lot more insight than what we perhaps currently had within the data. So a huge sort of data-driven focus with machine learning, sort of tapping into that data and using sort of robotic process automation to help eliminate some of the steps in things like creating a settlement figure such that a customer could go online, request a quote, and the quote is there immediately online and posted out to them, rather than having a colleague sat in the background performing that task. There'll be a lot of cloud first decisioning, but when people say cloud first, it doesn't necessarily mean that people do opt for the cloud. It's not necessarily the right decision for all companies and for what they're after. There may be cases and business cases for actually keeping it on premise, particularly around cloud costs, which can be an unknown, and they can be hard to estimate and hard to control. And before you know it, you're running a beast of a machine, and you're getting invoices for tens of thousands each month coming through. So you do have to be careful with that approach. The other exciting thing around technology is the use of ChatGPT, for example, and how OpenAI will help businesses. And even preparing for this podcast, I use ChatGPT to help generate some of my notes, such that the questions that we had sort of discussed, I said to ChatGPT that I was going to be recording a podcast this afternoon. Here's my CV. Here's my covering letter. and here's the questions that are going to be asked. Can you please generate the answers to those questions? And it outputted a whole load of text, to which I then said, well, that's too short. And I said it's going to be a 30-minute long podcast. So it went into more depth. I then said to it, I needed it as bullet points, and it would then provide it as bullet points. So the information I have in front of me is just, would have taken previously me time to do that, to take my CV, to take my other documentation, review the questions, and have a think about what would be the best answer. Instead, using technology and OpenAI to generate suggestive answers that I could use doesn't necessarily mean it's all right and it's all valid and will all be used, but it gives a lot of pointers and it helps, to drive that process.
Mm.
I think it could be useful in the recruitment line of work. I'm sure recruiters and agencies could use it to say, well, here's the job description, here's CV of candidate A, B, C, D, and load them all in, and for it to then determine who is the best fit candidate for that role. And it will use keywords, for example, to try and match it, but it will also try and perhaps intelligently match it. And you'd say to it, well, actually, I don't want somebody that matches everything because we probably can't afford that person. And so you teach it to say, I'm looking for somebody that I can grow and mature within the team. And they may not be the polished product yet, but they're somebody we can nurture over the next couple of years, and for that to assist in that process as well. So we're really at the cusp of the capability of what OpenAI can do. We just need to be careful that we don't take it as the definitive answer, in the same way as when you might search for something in Google or other search engine. You will review the search results and you make an informed opinion as to, okay, I'm going to go to this one that's third on the list. And then rather than going to page 12 on the list and finding some obscure answers. So
Mm.
you still need to exercise your own judgment when reviewing the answers before just taking them as gospel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think some really really great points there, and I don't think it would be a podcast at the moment if we didn't mention ChatGPT in some way, shape, and
Yeah.
form. But no, I can fully attest to from the applications that we've used, the use cases we've had within recruitment, it has offered a lot of value, definitely. And I think you got the nail totally on the head that it's not a definitive answer. I think technology essentially, as technology's been evolving, the whole purpose is to get information to people quicker and to help people, essentially get to the end result quicker. And I think that's really what ChatGPT is doing in a very sort of, impressive way. But I totally agree with you. It should never be taken as the gospel, because and it's one of the things I'm quite reassured by in recruitment, actually, that your point there about inputting a job spec, looking at a CV, ask ChatGPT which is going to be the best fit. It will approach that in a very methodical, consistent manner, and I'm sure actually output some really interesting insights between the two. But I think people have been trying to write software to replace recruiters for years, and I'm sure people have been trying to write software to replace a lot of people for years, but certainly within recruitment. But the thing I'm quite always reassured by is that because it's a people industry, yes, it will give you some really good insights, but until you've actually met that person and you've kind of had the conversation with them and looked at the whites of their eyes, it's you can't really assess the suitability of a candidate for a role, because a lot of it is around culture fit as well, and personality fit and that kind of thing. So like you say, I think it's a really great tool for giving a certain indicator that certain triggers that you might be moving in the right way. But I think, like lots of other industries, there will always be that need for that last piece of kind of human interaction and assessment, because that's the one bit that I still think we're very, very far away, and that is, AI's, well, call it AI, whatever you want to call it, a model's ability to assess the finer areas of culture and personality and that kind of thing. But yeah, it's unbelievably interesting, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I'm sure lots more exciting things to come on that front. But no, Andrew, I really enjoyed the chat. I think it's been a fantastic episode, and really appreciate your perspective. From having gone through your journey at PCF, and I'm really excited to see how your new adventure at Surrey and Sussex Police will pan out. So definitely keep us in the loop, and maybe come back in a few months' time and do another episode and let us know how it's all been going in the first few months. But I like to end each episode with the same question, which is, what's the best piece of advice you've ever received? If there's one bit of advice that stuck with you that you'd want to pass on to your fellow humankind, what would that be for you?
I think for me personally is understanding and recognizing how hybrid working has affected the world really since COVID, and it will lead and has led to a lot of burnout of employees. And the reason for that is through the work-life balance has become very blurred, and people will work longer hours when they're at home because they don't have commutes, and or they will try and squeeze too much into those hours. And people will work different hours, so it wouldn't be unusual to get an email from somebody at 7, 8 o'clock at night and feel the need to respond to that. And with such a connected world now, you have your email on your phone, on your iPad. They might ping through on your Apple Watch. It's very hard to escape work. So my probably my advice to people, and the advice that was given to me, is to do ensure you still have those work boundaries wherever you're working, whether that's at home or in the office, such that 5:30, 6 o'clock you do turn off your laptop, and you recognize that was my work time. This is now my private time, my personal time. I'm going to sit down and have dinner with my wife and children. I'm not going to be checking emails on my phone. I'm not going to be responding to anything that might come through. And to have things like self-care is not something a lot of people may be aware of or heard of, but self-care is basically looking after yourself and doing activities that bring you positive sort of emotions and feelings. It could be, for me, just simply walking the dog or going for breakfast with a friend. And it's those moments that essentially are charging you back up again so that you are ready for work. And so you need to make sure that you don't have blurred boundaries between work and your personal home life, because if it does become a very blurred, and before you know it, work will be your life at the expense of your health, your mental health, your physical health, and the detriment to those around you as well. So it's it's something I'm quite passionate about, is mental health, and making sure that colleagues are supported as well, and we don't add pressure onto colleagues to perform out of hours, weekends, etc. Obviously within IT there's always things we need to be doing, patching servers out of hours, but we recognize that and we know that, and there's no reason why that colleague couldn't then have a few hours off the next week or something like that to recoup and understand that is their recharging time essentially. So that would be, yeah, my advice to others.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic bit of advice to close on. Definitely resonates with me, for multiple reasons. One, like I said, the whole premise of we want to work with businesses that have an appreciation of people, and realize that their people are their greatest asset, and they have those kind of cultures where people do feel valued and not overstressed and overworked and that kind of thing. But yeah, the whole premise of self-care is definitely something that really resonates with me. I guess as a business owner, I'm working from home quite a lot. And actually, when I started the business, that was one of the main reasons I started my own business, was to work from home. It was sort of 6 months before the pandemic happened, and obviously the pandemic happened, and everyone started working from home. But I definitely resonate with what you're saying around the blurred boundaries and carving that time out for yourself, because as an entrepreneur, there's always more you can be doing, right? And when it's your kind of name
Yeah,
above the door, and you want to see the business be successful, there's always always fire up the laptop in the evening and do a few more emails, etc. But I've recognised that there's definitely core activities that you can feel guilty about doing at some time, but actually put you in a better mental state, and like you say, are going to preserve you longer term to be in the right place, like going to the gym or going to the driving range or whatever it may be, just sort of clearing your head for an hour, getting a little bit of physical exercise. I think it's something that, like I say, really shouldn't be underestimated. Hopefully, off the back of the pandemic, one of the positive things that we do all get now is a little bit more flexibility and a little bit more, balance in our life. So let's sort of use it in a positive way, rather than, like I say, sitting in home on the laptop 14 hours a day. Let's build some time into look after ourselves in the first instance. So
indeed.
I think a very, very interesting point to end on. So super. Well, thank you again for coming on. All that remains to be seen is to wish you the best of luck with your new role. Definitely keep in touch. We'd love to have you back on in future as a guest again, to come on and tell us the stories that you're able to tell us.
Yeah,
Confidentially, and yeah, all the best with it, and look forward to keeping in touch.
yeah. Many thanks, Guy. Thank
All
you.
right, cheers, Andrew. Bye.